Hello, everyone. Welcome to another author conversation video. Today, we're going to be talking to Betsy Bird about her lovely children's book, Long Road to the Circus. And, this is a Michigan Notable Book winner from 2022. So if you haven't got a chance to read it yet, I highly recommend picking it up off the shelves and giving it a good read. So we're going to talk with Betsy today about her writing process and different things that inspired the book. So we'll just jump right in. My first question for you today, Betsy. Oh, I should let you say hi. Yes, go ahead.
Hi.
I was thinking about that part.
Yeah.
So welcome, and let's go ahead and jump right in. Our first question for you today is, give us some background on yourself and how did you become a writer?
Sure. I grew up in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So growing up, I always, when they asked me when I was a little kid, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, writer. And then eventually at some point I was like, no health insurance. So I decided to become a librarian instead. But I had a lot of people in my family who wrote. I had two aunts who wrote books. My mom wrote poetry and she's a published poet now. I had a lot of just literacy was infused in the family. I had this vague idea I never really gave it up, the idea of being a writer. And I always, kids are always like, because they have like their standard set of like, ask the author who visits questions. And I think the teacher tells them like, ask them, what advice they give to kids. Well, the advice I give to kids is you could start right now and want to be a writer for the rest of your life, or you could like give it up and go back to it some other point. You can totally be a writer at any point in your life. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm over the age of 22, I can't be a writer now. Like, no, you can be a writer at any time. It's great. So it was really after I became a librarian, and I was working in New York City, and I sort of got into this whole blogging thing because it was new, and I started blogging about children's books, and as a result got to know a lot of children's authors and children's illustrators because I was a children's librarian. Mm-hmm. And then one day an illustrator was just like, hey, let's do a book together. And he was big time dude. He had New York Times bestseller books out and stuff. Wow. Brandon Dorman. And I was like, okay, because I didn't know how it worked. And what he wanted to do was he wanted to do just one thing in a book. He wanted to draw giants leaping. And I was like, okay. And we worked together. I wrote the words, he did the pictures, and my first picture book came out, and it's just sort of taken off ever since.
I love it. Giants leaping.
Leaping.
How specific that is.
I know, we came up with 3 different ideas that involved giants leaping. And we sold 2 of them, and then one of them became a book, and that was a giant dance party. So
you know what? If you think giant sleeping, dance party is.
That's what I said, And it's funny because he wanted to do like gross, warty giants, but in the course of the book, the publisher was like, nobody wants to buy that. Can you make them furry and blue? And we were like, we're not married.
Everybody loves furry and blue, right?
Exactly. Furry and blue, why not? So yeah, it works out well.
I love it. And I like, how you say you can be a writer at any time. I mean, 2 other of the authors that won 2022 Michigan Notable Book Authors, Steve Mac Jones and Angeline Booley, both of them didn't even have their first book until their 50s or 60s. Like,
exactly.
Right.
And what I like about children's books is, does ageism exist? Of course it does. It exists everywhere in our society, but it's a little less so in children's books. Like I remember not that long ago, there was a Newbery honor winner, and I think she was like 65, and it was her first middle grade novel, and it won a Newbery honor. So, it's, you can write anytime. It's fine. Yeah.
It's great. It's, cool. It lets people know, like, you have a chance. Mm-hmm. You don't have to give up on that chance.
Yeah. Anybody can write. It's great.
It's great. I love it. So I guess, your whole process of like, yeah, you can be a writer, but why do you write? And what is kind of your process for writing?
Sure. Why do I write? It's funny. Because I still blog, that dinky little children's literature blog that I started back then. It's continued to this day. It's hosted by School Library Journal. And I blog like 4 to 5 times a week. And it's so good because it really gives me the sense of like, I have a set writing time. And if I didn't have the blog, I guess I'd be just writing books the whole time. So probably a lot more prolific, to be fair. But I just enjoy it. And then when I my treat to myself is when I get to go on a writing retreat, and and I can just like spend like 3-4 days just like writing, which was how I wrote this book. I wrote it in a couple different writing retreats in Michigan. Usually it's in Michigan. That's usually where my writing retreats are. Usually take a little cabin somewhere or an Airbnb in the woods somewhere, which I highly recommend. I did one in White Pigeon and that worked out really well. There's the Gilchrist has like this retreat that is, it's mostly supposed to be spiritual, but they are fine with writers taking over their tiny cabin. So you bring food, you write, you fix your own food, you write, no internet. It's so good. So I write because I don't know. I find it thoroughly enjoyable.
It's a good reason.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. If I didn't enjoy doing it, you know, some people are like, oh, you have to suffer for your art. I'm like, maybe you do. I don't, because it's really fun. It's fun to do. It's fun to come up with stories and write them down, and maybe they'll become books, and maybe they won't become books. Like, I've written a lot of stuff that doesn't ever get published, but I've written a lot of stuff that did get published. So you never know. And it's sort of that not knowing that's kind of fun. And you don't write it for the sole purpose of it, like, oh, it must become a book. You write it because it's what you want to write and it's fun. You have this cool idea and you want to see how it works on the page. And sometimes it works great and sometimes it doesn't work at all. And it really just sort of depends.
Yeah. I mean, I like that, you know, just write because it's enjoyable.
Yeah. Because sometimes, and admittedly, sometimes there's times where I'm writing a book and it's like you're slogging uphill in the snow and it's like, oh, to get the words out, it's so painful. And then sometimes it's like this book where it's just like, you know, water flowing off my fingertips. It's just like, I can't even stop. I wouldn't be able to stop if I tried. It's too easy. So,
yeah, and you know, and I think that's good to know that sometimes it is a process and it is a slog.
Yeah.
And you know, every book, every writing piece is different.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
I like that. I guess, you know, so for this book, it kind of flowed through you. How did you originally get the idea for the book?
Oh, so that's kind of fun. So I grew up in Kalamazoo, as I said, and my mom worked in the local independent bookstore that was, for a while, the oldest independent bookstore in Kalamazoo, the Athena Bookshop. And we had local authors who would often come in and do book releases and things like that. So one such local author was David Small. And David Small lived in Mendon, which was a small town outside of Kalamazoo. And but he would tend to come to the Athena to do his book release parties. And you know, he was definitely my local author. Like, he came to my 4th grade class and he would do the pictures, you know, for the class, and I'd sit there like, oh, he knows my mom, you know, because he knew my mom because she worked in the store. And so he was talking to my mom, or he was talking to someone else and she overheard, either way. And he mentioned that he lived in the Morantat house. So my family has a family store, and we all have family stories. Some of them don't turn out to be true, but they're in the family. And we had this story. It was about my grandmother's no good stinking uncle. So my grandmother grew up in Burr Oak, Michigan, which is teeny tiny. And I've been doing tours of different small towns in Michigan, in the Southwest Michigan area. They've never heard of Burr Oak. Okay, so Burr Oak is like that big. Still there. And so she was, you know, this no good uncle would skip out on his farm chores. What was he doing? He was going over to Mendon, where Madame Morantat lived. Now, who's Madame Morantat at the time? She was an elderly ex-circus performer who held 2 world records, I should point out. But in any case, he would go over there to learn how to train the horses to do circus tricks. And this is one of those crazy stories where you're like, whatever. And then David mentions he lived in the Morantat house. So my mom does a little bit of digging, and sure shooting, there was a Madame Morantat. Her 2 world records to this day are for horse jumping over a thing, high jumping on a horse side saddle, which she holds to this day. There was a recent article in an equestrian magazine that says that it doesn't count because it wasn't officially recorded, even though it's in the newspaper with the amount there. And there's a photo of her doing it. But anyway, apparently it doesn't count. But she holds it to this day. And then the other world record was that she had trained her ostrich. She owned this ostrich by the name of Gaucho. She trained him to pull a cart next to a horse named Bonnie Ann, and to pull her like that, which is kind of crazy. So I heard this, that David lived in her house, and I was like, and okay, filed that away for later. And then later I'm like, wait a minute, I write children's books. David illustrates children's books. What if I did a picture book about Madame Marenta and my grandmother and her uncle and da 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 da. I was like, oh, brilliant idea.
Right.
That's up on the back. And so I typed up the picture book and I sent it to my agent, who promptly forgot about it. And so did I. And then a couple years went by, and the book expo had happened here in the Chicago area. And I had a coworker, and he came in. He was like, "Oh, I saw David Small. He wasn't looking too good." I was like, "He's going to die. He's going to die. He's going to die, and not have done my book." And so I started poking my poor agent. I was like, "Steven, read the manuscript." And he's like, "I don't have it." And I was like, "I'll resend it." And then I looked at it. I was like, "Whoa, I better rewrite this."
You're like, before I resend it.
It was terrible. I was like, rewrote it, sent it to him. He was like, "This is pretty good." And I was like, "Yeah." And he knew David's agent at the time, and he sent it over. And David said, well, come to the farm, come see the Morantat house, and we'll talk about it. And I was like, oh, this is going to happen. So I go there, I see the house, I meet Sarah Stewart, his wife, and then we see the studio. We all go out to dinner. We meet a local historian who presents us with a pack of all the information you would ever want to know about Madame Morantat, which is because that's how you do research. It just falls into your lap.
Right.
And then we're driving, and David's like, yeah, I don't see it as a picture book. And I'm like, And he's like, I see it as a novel. I was like, a novel is longer than a picture book.
Sure
A picture book is 32 pages. A novel is longer than 32 pages. It would require more words. And he's like, I think you can do it. I was like, I don't know why you would think that, as I had never written a novel. And had no experience writing novels. I mean, I'd written them on my own, but they'd never been published or anything. But by gum, now he claims this took 1 year. I don't think that's the case. But anyway, apparently in a year, that's where the water coming off the fingertips comes in.
Yeah.
I wrote an actual novel, and we sent it to him. And by gum, he said he would do it. But here's the thing I didn't know. He'd been asked to do Madame Morantat books a lot before.
Interesting.
Many people had been like, here's my book. He was not interested. And the reason that he was interested in this one was this guy on the cover. He got to draw ostriches. He was so happy. He was like, I've never had to do that before. And boy, howdy, he just goes crazy with it. Man, he really enjoyed drawing those ostriches. So yeah, that's how the book came to be.
I love it. And I feel like the other important thing to get out of this interview is that illustrators have very specific things that they want to draw. So you just have to discover what that is and write a book to allow them the opportunity to draw it.
Well, particularly if they're David Small. And, at one point in the tour, like we passed what I just like to call the Dusty Awards corner, where apparently he just gets like a Pulitzer and he's like, bah! And it's like, it piles up in the corner. It's like, there's a Caldecott and there's the Pulitzer and National Book Award or something like.
Yeah. He's like, that's no big deal.
It's not like, oh, it's sort of like, and so he can pick and choose his jobs if he wants to. He don't care. He's got to actually like the book, want to do the book, and find something interesting about it. And some illustrators, I mean, that's really the case. They have other things they could be doing, and it's got to give them a hook.
Yeah, I love that. It's like he's like, I mean, that's high praise for your book too. He was interested in what you presented him.
He's just a really nice guy.
A little bit of that too.
Yeah.
So I guess this is a good question. Besides a girl riding an ostrich, is there a theme that runs through your book?
Yeah, the theme is very much so. I said I was going to base this on my grandmother. In fact, I based it on my grandmother's older sister, Susie. And so I named the character Susie. And there are some similarities in that they both wanted to get out of Burr Oak. This is early 20th century. You're a farm girl growing up in Southwest Michigan. At that time, you don't have connections all over the world or anything like that. You want to get out, and it's going to be super tough because your parents, your grandparents, they all grew up here. And leaving it would be a huge deal. So the whole point is that she notices Madame Morantat. Now, Madame Morantat was not born Madame Morantat, which would be cool, but if she wasn't, she was born Emma Peake. In fact, you can visit Emma Peake's gravestone in Mendon. It's very easy to find. It's like right by the road.
Oh, wow.
Though I was under the impression it just said Emma Peake. It actually says Madame Morantat, Emma Peake. So it does have both their names on there, which was well done. But she got out. She was a farm girl, just like anyone else, and she was really good at. Could ride quickly on horses. She could speed on them. She would race them, and that was unusual for a girl riding side saddle. And that was how she established herself, and that's how like a talent scout, spotted her and picked her up, and she was able to start a circus career. Whereas, and Susie sees this, and so Susie's like, okay, that is. It's like my husband, who has worked in the film industry, says they call it breaking in because once you've broken in that way, they fix it so that no one else can break in that way. And that's very much like she can't do exactly what Madame Miranda did because that was done. But she's got to find her own thing. And for whatever reason, Susie believes her own thing is, all right, I'm going to learn how to ride an ostrich. That's never been done before. And that's my ticket out of here. So
I love it. It's just that finding a way out sometimes, or like finding your own path.
It's funny, I didn't want to be cast aspersions on anyone who wants to stay, because her friend Mimi wants to stay and is very much like, look, you kind of have everything you need here. This is a pretty sweet setup.
Yeah.
But Susie, in contrast, is the kind of person who wants to go, and that's two totally legitimate ways of dealing with the world and how you want to live your life. So I just wanted her to have the option. So yeah, that's the theme. The theme is having the option, and if you don't have the option, making the option your own.
Yes. I like that. Making the option your own. And, how would you define this work beyond it's a children's book?
Oh, it's historical fiction, very much so. Did a fair amount of research, thanks to the enormous packet of research. Do you want to know what Madame Morantat's grandparents did for a living? I can tell you. Yeah. So yeah, had my research there. Did a bunch of different types of research. Definitely did a lot of ostrich research, and I gotta say, I have to hold up the Superpower Field Guide of Ostriches by Rachel Poliquin. This is the best kids book ever made on ostriches, and that's not saying much. There's not a ton out there, but this book is amazing because they are the most bizarre creatures. One problem I had with the book was that I couldn't call them dinosaurs, and I wanted desperately to call them dinosaurs because they are so dinosaur-like in so many ways. But obviously at that time they would not have. So I do have her do research in the book, and many of the facts that she comes up with came from this book as well. So yeah.
And I like that too. Like, historical fiction, when you're doing the research, it's not just, understanding the person or the place, but it's also understanding like, how would they talk about something?
Well, and I have to give a hat to my copy editors, because my copy editors, I have a very colloquial style that I write in, very sort of, this is how people kind of, it's not, it has the danger of tipping into Southern. It's rural Michigan, but there's always that fear that's going to tip into Southern because my grandfather was Southern. So I try to, keep it in one thing. But they would be like, look, you included this phrase, but it didn't come into the lexicon until 1929. And your book does not take place in 1929, so we can't include it. And I'd be like, okay, thank you for pointing that out. So yeah, there was my research on my hand, but then things I wouldn't even think about that I just offhandedly put in there. And even then, there's a phrase that I use. I don't even know where I came up with it. It's the thing you write and you're not really paying attention to what's coming out. And a guy once pointed out, I say, I'm in the very first chapter of the book. The mom is telling the story of how Susie was born and how she was born very small. And the way that she describes it is that she was, I think she says, as small as a coop's egg. And I had a guy after a reading once who came up to me and was like, how would she have known how large a coop is, let alone its egg? They're native to England. Oh my gosh. I'm like, I think it's a family phrase that probably had been in the family for quite some time, and nobody in their right mind knows what a coop is, let alone how big the egg would be, except eggs are small. So unless the coop was as large as an ostrich, it's going to be a small baby. That's my justification for that one. But people are going to call you out on every little thing. It's like, yeah, a coop, eh? I don't know about that one.
That's why, it comes down to having good editors, man. Good editors make good books.
Good editors and good copy editors make great books. Yeah. And I Erin Clark was my editor, and she's great. She was the editor of Wonder. She was the editor of The Book Thief, and then she was the editor of my book. So I was very, very lucky to get her.
I love it. I think that's the thing. People underestimate the power of a good editor.
They do.
But, so you're defined as a historical fiction. You're talking about all the research that went into it. Was that the hardest part of this book, or is there something else that sticks out as, no, that was it?
Well, of course, we finished the book, and then it would have to go in for the editor to, because you sell the book, but then the editor comes in and is like, okay, we're going to be making some changes.
Yes.
And I was terrified. She could easily have come in and been like, okay, so the whole second half has got to go. Like, she could have done that, and I would have been like, yes, ma'am, I will do whatever you want, ma'am. It's fine. Thankfully, she liked it as it was. She wanted. I think when we turned it in, did we have an ending? I think we had an ending. Yeah, we had an ending. Not sure how much of an ending we had, and certainly there was some stuff, just emotional beats that she felt were missing, and she'd say, okay, you need to include this emotional beat, this emotional beat, this emotional beat, and I was like, okay, well, we'll just turn those into chapters as well as like sort of filter them into the book. But that was tricky. Because you've got continuity for one thing, because here's the thing, I'm a trained children's librarian. I read children's books all the time for my blog, and I always, like, when I have a middle grade novel, I'm like, oh, it's so long. It's so long. It's like, well, it's more than 200 pages. I don't have time. Now, when you're writing the book and you have to reread it constantly, that means you're reading like a 200-page book, like over and over and over and over and over again, to make sure that when you said that Mimi had blonde hair and braids on this page, she also had it on the page over here. So you've got it. So that was actually the hardest thing for me, was just like trying to keep straight in my brain, like, because I would change names sometimes. There were occasional times when, I would have to change something about a character and then have to go back and figure out where I had mentioned those things about that character. I think we had the older brother, Bill, was mean. Like, he was meaner in the original than, like, in the book. He's put worms in her eggs. And originally there was something bad with a frog. And they were like, animal cruelty, not good. Apparently, animal cruelty to worms, A-okay.
Right.
But not frog, nothing with a backbone, I was like, okay. So, but there's the continuity. Just trying to keep everything straight in your own brain, because remember, you're remembering all the previous drafts on top of this new stuff. So you're having a hard time sometimes, like, keeping track. I had to constantly look at her notes and be like, what does she want again? Oh, right, okay. And then because this was happening, all these edits were happening during COVID. I didn't have much else to do. So that was good. That actually worked out well.
Yeah, right.
But David also he can only work one book at a time. He was kind of going stir crazy. So he was doing the art. So usually the author and the illustrator of a children's book do not communicate. There's a wall between the two of them. They do, and this is for the protection of the illustrator, because the last thing you want is for your artist to be doing their art and then the author's like coming in over their shoulder and being like, I never imagined her teeth like that. Can you change it? Like, you don't want that. You want a certain artistic license for the illustrator. But in this case, we already knew each other and we were already in communication. So we were just doing to the point where, like, he'd be like, what do you think of her braids? And I'm like, well, I don't think so. Looks like Pippi Longstocking, maybe thing on the back. And he's like, okay. And then later he'd be like, I'd like to put some chickens at the beginning of chapter 33. And I'd be putting in chickens in chapter 33. So it was very good. It was much more of a collaboration than I've ever really, I think, that I would normally get on a middle grade.
Yeah. That was probably pretty helpful too, to have that, all right, illustration, new picture, new images, new ideas. Yeah,
because I would have it in my mind what his art would be for, like, saying, and then he'd go in a completely different direction. I'd be like, oh, I didn't think of that. And sometimes I'd like it more and sometimes I'd like it less. It just depended, but it was his take. The whole joy is that they surprise you. There is one little image of the uncle being thrown from the back of the ostrich. Okay, this is without a doubt my favorite picture in the whole book, because of his little legs, the curve of the little legs. I'm not a tattoo person, but if I were to get a tattoo, might be of the bird, but it would certainly be of the little guy being thrown. It just cracked me up so much when I saw it. That is my favorite picture of the book.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I didn't even notice the curve of the legs before.
It's awesome. It's very, very Buster Keaton. I love it. Yeah.
It is. It is very Buster Keaton.
Yeah.
Oh man. I mean, so you kind of talked about your favorite picture, favorite image in the book. What are some of the other favorite pieces or characters within your work?
Yeah, it was funny. There were things. So when writing so having to turn it from a picture book to a novel, I had to figure out how to do that. I was like, well, what am I going to draw on? And I sort of hit on something that it felt like a cheat. I don't think it was a cheat, but it was, I've got family stories. We've all got these family stories. And I was like, well, let me tell you, when it comes to filling in a story that is already based on your family, suddenly I'm pulling family stories left and right, and I'm putting them in there as fast as I can. I was putting in so many family stories. I was asking my husband, like, hey, you got your family story about Odie and the toe. Can I take that? And he'd be like, ask my dad. I'm like, can I have it? And he's like, sure. And I'm like, yay, Odie and the toe going in the book. So yeah, I was just taking family stories left and right, just putting in one book, and to the point where the book was done. Like, except for like a couple little twinky things. And I hadn't done the dedication. And my aunt was saying to me, we were at a dinner. It was just me and my parents and my aunt. And she happened to mention that Joe, who's the father of our main character, based on my actual great-grandfather, Joe, that he had a phrase during, like, when there was a depression, which occasionally there was. And his phrase was, our rags may. And
love it.
I was like, why are you telling me this now and not when I was gathering family stories? So I put it on the dedication. It's in the dedication now. And I was like, I'm working that in. I can't, I'm sorry.
You're like, it's too good.
Casually give me that phrase, and then it's too late for me to put in the book. It's going in the book. So that's what I really enjoyed, was like working in the family stories. Like, so Mariah was my great-great-grandmother, Joe's mother. And there was that family story about how she cut herself while peeling an apple, and then she's bleeding everywhere. And her daughter-in-law, my great-grandmother, was like, mother, put a bandage on that. You're going to bleed to death. And Mariah, who was a cranky soul, was like, I ain't got enough blood to bleed to death. It's a great line. Yeah. So that's in the book. So really, it was all the individual stories that I was able to like fit in like little puzzle pieces. Like, all right, they can fit. You can get them in there. And then there's just stuff I made up. My mom is quick to inform people, this is a work of fiction. This makes this family look like a bunch of hicks. They were not. And I'm like, yeah, all right, they were all very well educated. I understand that. But they were farm folk, and this is a farm folk book. So
you're like,
yeah. Besides, now it's in a book. Everyone's gonna think it's real anyway.
I know, right? You could say it's work of fiction, but
I'm just saying, my descendants will now think that this is fact. I'm just saying.
Listen, it's like those movies that they're inspired by true events.
Right, exactly. Inspired by true events, even though at no point did Susie ever sit on an ostrich. To the best of my knowledge. Now she has. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I made it happen.
Yeah, she went to Detroit and became a hairdresser, which is also cool. But
that is actually
a different adventure. Yeah,
a different adventure. Not riding an
ostrich adventure. No.
A little more city versus.
Oh yeah, she was far more city. Yeah, cool clothes. And then the depression hit. Whee! So,
yay!
Yay!
Hey, but what is it? Our rags
may flap us to death, but we will not starve.
There you go.
Exactly.
There you go. Love it. So I guess this is more for our interest. What did it mean to you to have been selected as a Michigan Notable Book Author?
Oh, so nice. Nice. Like I say, born and raised in Michigan. I've got a book based in Kalamazoo / Parchment that I'm working on right now. This was set in Baroque, but there's a lot of Mendon in it at the same time, so it's really kind of St. Joseph County area based. So and I felt like Michigan was almost a character in the book. I have a chapter that was not initially in there, but it was added later, where Susie and her best friend are sort of just around the cornfields, and it's sort of, that chapter sort of became my sort of ode to Michigan in some ways. So when it became a Michigan Notable, it was just, it was just deeply satisfying and good to
Oh.
hear. It was like, oh, good.
Oh, good.
Because that Michigan is kind of a character in the book. And on the one hand, she is desperately trying to get away to it. On the other hand, she cannot help but notice that Madame Morantat came back.
Yeah.
And always, and I don't mention it, but she would always come back. When the summer months were too hot, she would always summer in Michigan, and then she would, and when the circus would pick, apparently she would park her circus, because she had an entire circus train car. She would just park it in the back of her house because apparently she was right by the train lines. And then they would just come along, hook it up to the Ringling Brothers train, and then go off. But she always came back. She always came back to Michigan, and so that it becoming a notable book, that was lovely.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. I mean, as a committee, we all saw that, Michigan was a character too, right? You can sense that, and that, like, the love of place.
Yeah. And it helps that David lives there now. So
yeah, that does make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, when he's, and when he's drawing, actually, I think we had to change what kind of tree this was based on the leaves, or he had to change the leaves. But yeah, he could look out and say, I think I say what kind of tree this is, and then he makes sure that the leaves and the tree is completely accurate and everything. So,
oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah.
Level of care for the details.
Exactly.
And I mean, I guess this is, again, your chance to sort of say again, why do you think people should read your book?
Well, it's really fun. It's historical fiction, which had its heyday. It's actually not as popular these days as it used to be in kids' books. But it's just a rollicking good tale. I had an editor who did want to publish it, but ultimately we didn't go with, who said this is the kind of book that I could see myself as a kid climbing up my favorite tree and just reading it up there.
Oh.
And that was just the nicest thing that she said. And that's how I really feel about it. I feel it's got great facts. So if you want your factual information, you're gonna learn a lot about ostriches. You are gonna learn a lot about that. And then if you just want to, read something that's funny, it's got a lot of humor. You're learning a lot of history. Not just Michigan history, but circus history and things like that. So yeah, it's just a really enjoyable sort of trip into another place, even if you do live in Michigan.
Yeah.
Maybe especially because you live in Michigan, there's going to be stuff that's both familiar and unfamiliar in it.
It's true.
Yeah.
I mean, as someone who grew up outside of Detroit area, there was a lot that was unfamiliar to me, but I could also recognize, like, oh yeah, this is Michigan. Yeah. So I love it. And which writers do you find yourself reading, especially with your blog? I'm sure you have a few that are kind of circulating.
I do. I mean, I read everybody I can in a given year, and it's so hard, but I'm reading mostly children's authors. So if you're asking me for children's authors, that's mostly, I've got my favorites. There's certain authors where they put out a book and you're the first one in line to get it. There's an author named Frances Hardin. She's British. She writes books that no one else has a brain that could possibly write. She's sort of become a bit popular in the last few years, which kind of surprised me because her books are peculiar. She has a book called A Face Like Glass that is like nothing else you've ever read in your entire life. But she has another book coming out. It's coming in England first, and they'll come over here, and so I'm waiting for that. I've got my old writers that I used to love, like Ray Bradbury and things like that. And then I've got, oh gosh, I don't know. There's just a lot of people writing today that I enjoy. But yeah, it's a wide range. It's hard to stick any single name out. Yeah.
I get it too. Especially, I feel like, I have your old faithfuls that you go back to, like you said, but it's so hard, it's just, there's so many great writers, and there's more and more who are starting to publish. And every year it's like, I feel like I have a new favorite author.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you again for talking with us and sharing, your writing process, the whole history behind this, which I find truly fascinating. Just as fascinating as Madame Morantat is, like, the whole process of you actually getting this book into being. I think it's fascinating. So
well, thank you. And thank you for talking to me about it. I love talking about it. So.
Yeah. I mean, that's the one good thing. You can always rely on authors and librarians. We love to talk about books. So
exactly. It's just a bonus if I'm both. Yeah.
Exactly. I know, right? You're going to double the fun.
Hey.
Well, thanks again, and best of luck with your upcoming book. I am very interested in it too, especially, since it's dealing with Michigan Place.
Oh, well, I should probably finish it then. There you
go. Do it.
I'll try.
Yeah. When it better get published. Come on, editors.
I will try. I will see what I can do. All right.
Well, best of luck, and thanks again for talking with us today.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.